They held your hand in public, said all the right words, made you believe it was love. But when it came time to choose effort over convenience, they vanished into silence that still echoes. Welcome to Broken Truth, where love meets lies, and every story reveals the pain behind the smile. Some people crave the feelings that love brings, the warmth, the attention, the validation, but not the responsibility that love requires. They love the idea of you, not the weight of commitment, not the patience it takes when things aren't perfect. When confronted with the emotional labor real love demands, consistency, empathy, accountability, they retreat, not because you were too much, but because being true in love would mean growing up, and they weren't ready to be anyone's safe place. They betrayed because they were chasing the high of intimacy without the depth of responsibility. He never made grand entrances, never showed up with flowers or promises wrapped in gold foil. But he had a way of arriving that felt like poetry, soft eyes, tired voice, and silence that made you want to lean in and ask him what he was carrying. And maybe that's what pulled her in, not his charm, not his words, but the ache in his presence, like someone who was always looking for home but never unpacked his bags anywhere. She met him in a season of her life when her hands were open, not desperate, not empty, just open. She wasn't looking for a savior or a story, just someone whose presence felt like less noise, more music. And for a while, he was exactly that. He liked her softness, the way she listened, the way she remembered the small things, how she'd wait for his breathing to even out before letting go of his hand at night. He said she made him feel held, even when she wasn't touching him, and she, in her quiet belief in goodness, thought that was enough. She didn't know then that some people love the feeling of being loved more than they love the person offering it. It began beautifully, like most betrayals do. Late night drives with no destination, conversations that felt like confessions, kisses that didn't rush to undress, but stayed a little longer like prayers. He told her about his past, fractured family, fleeting lovers, the fear of becoming like the people who hurt him. She thought honesty was a promise. She didn't realize it was only a preview. She gave him a place to rest, not just a home, but her time, her silence, her patience. And he took it like someone dying of thirst, grateful at first, then entitled. He loved being loved by her, loved the way she looked at him like he was more than what the world saw. But he didn't love the mirror she became, because soon she started asking for things, not much. Just messages when he said he'd call, conversations that didn't end with "you're overthinking," plans that didn't cancel last minute, commitment not carved in stone, just shown in patterns. He said she was changing. She wasn't. She was just growing out of the idea that love without effort is enough. She stopped laughing off the small disappointments. She started noticing the delays, the forgetfulness, the way his hands stopped reaching for hers in crowded places. Love, she learned, begins in the moments no one else sees. The choosing, the remembering, the showing up. He stopped choosing. She kept hoping. And the unraveling wasn't loud. It was quiet, like a fabric fraying at the seams, a message left unseen, a birthday forgotten, a promise broken with a casual "I was busy." There was no final fight, no big betrayal, just small exits, his absence. One day at a time, one night, as he lay beside her, she asked, "Do you still want this?" He turned his face away and whispered, "I don't know." And that "I don't know" was the most honest thing he'd said in weeks. She realized then he never intended to stay. He didn't lie. He just didn't correct the illusion. He enjoyed being loved, but love, in its full form, demanded more than he was willing to give. He wanted warmth, not responsibility, a soft body, not a full heart. He didn't want to carry, only be carried. And she wasn't built for half love. She wasn't the kind to love temporarily or conditionally. She loved fully, even when it cracked her bones, especially then, The last time she saw him, he hugged her like someone saying thank you, not sorry. There were no tears, no desperation, just an unspoken truth resting in the silence between them. He walked away, lighter. She stood heavier with the weight of understanding. She didn't chase him, not because she didn't want to, but because that's when she understood. You cannot convince someone to stay who only ever wanted to visit. In the weeks that followed, people asked what happened. She didn't say much, just smiled and said, "Some people love the light, but not the switch that keeps it on." At night, she missed him, not the man he was, but the version she believed. And the one who held her like he meant it, the one who said always in between kisses. But healing, she found, wasn't in forgetting him. It was in forgiving herself for confusing presence with promise. She stopped writing texts she'd never send. She deleted their photos, not out of bitterness, but because she no longer needed reminders of what wasn't real. She didn't become colder, she became clearer. Clarity doesn't always feel like peace at first. Sometimes it feels like grief, but she allowed it, sat with it, learned from it. She stopped saying, maybe he will change. She started saying, I deserve someone who doesn't make me wonder. And the hardest part? Realizing he wasn't a bad person, just a broken one who didn't want to heal. And she was tired of bleeding for people who refused to stop cutting themselves. She never hated him. She just stopped romanticizing confusion, stopped calling inconsistency mystery, stopped writing poetry about someone who never read between her lines. Some nights she still dreams of him, in that soft light where nothing is expected and everything feels beautiful. But in the morning, she wakes up with gratitude, not because it didn't hurt, but because it taught her what she needs. Not just love, but responsibility, effort, presence that stays when things get hard. And next time, she won't open her arms to someone who only comes alive in candlelight. She'll wait for someone who shows up in daylight, even when it's raining. Someone who stays, not just someone who wants to be loved, but someone who's ready to love back. And that difference, that simple, painful truth, became her closure. The kind that didn't need words, just growth, and she grew quietly, unapologetically, beautifully. The mornings were the hardest part, not because she missed him anymore, but because her body still hadn't adjusted to the absence. The way silence filled the room where his breath used to be, the stillness of a phone that no longer buzzed with half-hearted apologies or midnight check-ins. But she wasn't angry, not anymore. She was just tired. Tired of trying to make sense of someone who never made the effort to stay. Tired of carrying questions. Like, was I too much? When she had only ever given her truth, gently, vulnerably. Tired of defending the very parts of her that made her a good partner. So she stopped defending, stopped debating, stopped shrinking. There was no single moment of transformation. No loud revelation, just quiet choices made daily, in the mirror, in the grocery store, in conversations where she didn't feel the need to explain what broke her anymore. She began to live in smaller, more intentional ways. She made tea slowly in the mornings, took herself on walks without her phone, let the sun hit her face while she sat on a park bench with a book that had nothing to do with heartbreak and everything to do with becoming. She wrote letters she never sent, not to him, but to the girl she had been. The one who said yes when she wanted to say no. The one who thought love meant sacrificing peace for potential. She didn't shame her. She just sat with her, forgave her, and promised not to abandon her again. And when new people came into her life, some kind, some confusing, she didn't rush to decode their intentions. She watched, she listened, she asked herself the quiet question, does this feel safe or familiar? And if it felt like a pattern, she didn't try to solve it, she stepped away. Red flags no longer felt like mysteries, they felt like exits, and she took them. She no longer called inconsistency bad timing. She called it what it was, unreadiness wearing the mask of affection. She stopped choosing people based on chemistry alone, started choosing them based on how they showed up on ordinary days, not just when things were easy, not just when she was glowing, and slowly she rewired her definition of love. Love wasn't a chase, love wasn't confusion, love wasn't butterflies that felt more like anxiety. Love was clarity. It was I meant it without needing to ask. Twice it was I'm here, followed by action, not silence. She didn't harden. That was important. She kept her softness, but guarded it like it mattered. She let people in through doors, not broken windows. She learned to say, I need consistency, without apologizing for sounding needy, because it wasn't neediness, it was self-respect. It was a boundary, not a burden. Healing didn't arrive like a celebration. It arrived like a quiet decision over coffee one morning, looking out the window, realizing she hadn't thought about him in days. And when she did, it didn't ache, it just existed, like a chapter read and closed. She no longer waited for closure from people who couldn't even offer clarity when they were in her life. She gave herself the closure, and in that softness, in that peace, she finally understood. She was never too much. She just gave too deeply to someone who never learned to hold depth. And that's not love's fault. It's just a lesson. So no, when love comes again, and it will, she will recognize it, not by how fast it moves, but by how gently it stays, not by the fireworks, but by the warmth that lasts long after. The spark, she will still be open, still be kind, but no longer available to anyone who only wants a home when it's raining. She is not angry, she is not waiting, she is just living fully, softly, clearly, and finally she is free. Subscribe to Broken Truth, where we don't just ask why they betrayed, we learn how to never betray ourselves again.